The storm had come without a whisper of warning, as if the sky itself had decided to betray the city. One moment, the late evening air was calm, filled with the distant hum of traffic and the golden glow of streetlights. The next, heavy clouds rolled in like a dark curtain being drawn across the heavens. In minutes, the world outside turned as black as midnight, though the clock read barely past 7. Then came the rain, sheets of it relentless, pounding against rooftops and rattling windows, as if nature had unleashed its fury all at once. Marcus Thompson stood at his front door, watching the chaos unfold through the glass panels. The rain blurred everything into streaks of silver, and each flash of lightning illuminated the street like a strobe light at some surreal dance. Thunder followed close behind, rolling so deeply that it seemed to shake the very foundation of his modest suburban home. He drew in a slow breath, steadying himself, and glanced back toward the kitchen. At the table sat Jamie, his 8-year-old son, a pencil clutched in his small hand as he worked intently over a math worksheet. The boy hummed softly to himself, tapping the eraser against the page whenever he paused to think. Despite the storm rattling outside, Jamie seemed completely focused on finishing his homework, his head bent in determination. Marcus felt a quiet swell of pride. At 35, his life had been reshaped by fatherhood, pared down to its simplest truths. There was work, there was parenting, and there was a quiet joy of watching his son grow into someone curious, kind, and resilient. The house was nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a small yard, furniture that was more practical than stylish. But it was theirs, warm, safe, filled with comfortable clutter of books, toys, and the little signs of life built with steady, careful love. Marcus knew he wasn't the kind of man who would ever be called extraordinary. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, but he was reliable. He was present. His job as a senior project manager at Sterling Enterprises paid enough to cover the mortgage, groceries, and the occasional family outing. More importantly, it gave him flexibility to be there for Jamie. School plays, soccer practices, bedtime stories. He had built a life around being the kind of father he had once wished for himself. The doorbell rang. The sharp chime cut through the storm's noise just as a particularly violent crack of thunder shook the house. Marcus blinked, startled, and moved to the door. The last thing he expected was a visitor, especially on a night like this. He pulled it open and froze. There, standing on his porch in the downpour, was Victoria Sterling, his CO, the woman who owned the very company he worked for, the figure who commanded conference rooms with sharp intelligence and composed authority. Only tonight, she looked nothing like the untouchable executive Marcus knew. She was soaked to the bone. Her auburn curls, usually styled into perfect waves, clung in wet strands around her face. The cream-colored dress she wore was plastered against her frame, heavy with rain. Water dripped from her lashes as she blinked against the storm, and her arms trembled despite the warmth of the evening. Her usual aura of power had been stripped away by the weather, leaving her looking smaller, fragile, and, though he hated to admit it, lost. Miss Sterling, Marcus said automatically, his voice carrying both surprise and concern. He stepped aside without thinking. Please, come in. What on earth are you doing out here? Are you all right? For a moment, she hesitated on the threshold. Pride flickered in her expression. That same pride Marcus had seen countless times in board meetings. But it faltered beneath the circumstances, and with a reluctant breath she admitted, I'm so sorry to bother you at home, Marcus. My car broke down about 3 blocks from here, and my phone is dead. The storm hit so suddenly. I didn't know what else to do. I remembered you mentioned living in this neighborhood once. Her words spilled out quickly, the way a person speaks when they're unaccustomed to asking for help. It was only then Marcus realized she wasn't alone. A boy stood just behind her, pressed close to her side. He was slender, about Jamie's age, with the same intelligent green eyes that belonged to his mother. But where Victoria fought to maintain composure even now, her son looked pale and wide-eyed, clearly frightened by the storm's violent display. His small hand clutched at the fabric of her dress, seeking reassurance. Please, coming out of the rain, Marcus insisted, ushering them both inside. His tone left no room for argument. Both of you are drenched through. You'll catch cold if you stay out there. The boy obeyed, stepping hesitantly into the hallway, his shoes leaving wet prints on the floorboards. Behind him, Victoria followed, clearly uncomfortable but too exhausted to protest. Marcus shut the door firmly against the storm, the sound of rain instantly muffled to a steady drumbeat on the roof. At the kitchen table, Jamie looked up from his homework. His eyes widened at the sight of strangers dripping rainwater onto their floor, but rather than shrinking back, his face lit up with curiosity. At 8 years old, Jamie had an openness about him, a fearless friendliness that Marcus often envied. "Dad, who is this?" he asked, setting his pencil aside as he scrambled down from his chair. Marcus placed a steadying hand on his son's shoulder. "This is Miss Sterling," he explained, "my boss from work. And this is her son. They got caught in the storm and needed a place to wait out." The boy stepped forward a little, still keeping close to his mother. His voice was soft, almost uncertain. "I'm Ethan," he said. "I'm 9. I'm Jamie, and I'm 8. Jamie replied instantly, his grin wide. "Do you want to see my room? It's got the best view of the lightning. You can see the whole sky from my window." For the first time since arriving, Victoria's expression softened into something real. A small, genuine smile tugged at her lips. "Ethan loves storms," she admitted, brushing damp curls back from her forehead. "He's been fascinated by weather since he was very small." Marcus caught the shift in her voice, the way it grew warmer when she spoke about her son. It was a tone he had never once heard in the office, and it revealed more about Victoria Sterling than all the annual reports combined. "Jamie," Marcus said, "why don't you show Ethan your weather books while I help Miss Sterling get comfortable?" The boys disappeared upstairs within seconds, chattering about thunder and lightning, as though they had been friends forever. Their footsteps thudded on the stairs, followed by excited laughter. The sound lingered even as they vanished from view. Left behind in the living room, Marcus found himself alone with his CEO in circumstances he never could have imagined. Victoria stood awkwardly, dripping water onto his worn hardwood floors. Without the armor of tailored suits and professional polish, she looked not like a CEO, but like any other mother caught in a storm of life. Vulnerable. Human. "I have some of my sister's clothes upstairs," Marcus offered, breaking the silence. "She visits sometimes with her kids. I think they'd fit you better than staying in those wet things." Victoria gave a small, grateful nod. "Thank you, Marcus. I realize this is highly inappropriate, showing up like this. If you prefer to just call me a taxi when the storm passes, I'd understand completely." Marcus shook his head firmly. "Miss Sterling, you're a mother caught in a storm with your child. There's nothing inappropriate about accepting help. This isn't business. This is just human decency." Her lips parted as though she wanted to argue, but then she exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing. 20 minutes later, the storm still raged outside, hammering the windows with unrelenting rain. But inside Marcus's home, warmth began to return. Victoria emerged from the guest bathroom, transformed. She wore a simple blue sweater and a pair of jeans borrowed from Marcus's sister. Her damp hair now brushed back into a loose ponytail. Without her expensive designer dress and immaculate presentation, she looked younger, softer, more approachable than the powerful executive he saw every day. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice carrying both relief and humility as she accepted the steaming mug of tea Marcus handed her. "I can't tell you how grateful I am for your kindness. I never imagined myself here like this." Marcus smiled faintly, easing into the armchair across from her. "Life has a way of surprising you, S. Don't think too much about the setting. You're safe, your son's safe. That's what matters." From upstairs, muffled laughter echoed down, the kind that only children could make, free and unrestrained. Victoria's eyes lifted toward the ceiling, her expression softening. "Ethan hasn't laughed like that in so long," she admitted. "Not with that kind of joy. He usually keeps to himself." Marcus studied her quietly, noticing the weariness in her eyes. She wore her responsibilities like armor, yet the cracks were visible now that the storm had stripped away her defenses. "How long have you been raising Ethan on your own?" he asked gently. Her fingers tightened around the mug. For a moment she seemed to debate whether to answer, then, with a sigh, she let the truth spill. "Since he was 4, his father, Well, he decided that being a parent didn't fit into his career ambitions. He took a position in London and never looked back. Calls are rare. Visits non-existent. Marcus felt the weight of her confession settle between them. It was a level of honesty neither of them had shared before. "I understand," he said softly. "Jamie's mother left when he was 2. She said she felt trapped, like motherhood had clipped her wings. Last I heard, she was backpacking through Europe, rediscovering herself one country at a time." Victoria's head turned sharply toward him, surprise flickering in her gaze. "I had no idea. You've worked for me for 3 years, and I never once realized you were a single parent." He gave a small shrug. "I don't usually discuss my personal life at work, professional boundaries, and all that. But watching you tonight, seeing how you fought the storm with Ethan at your side, it reminded me that we're not just employees and employers. We're parents, doing whatever it takes to keep our kids safe." The storm growled outside, lightning flickering across the curtains. But inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Victoria wasn't just the CEO anymore, and Marcus wasn't just her employee. They were 2 human beings sharing the same unspoken struggles. Loneliness, sacrifice, the daily balancing act of parenthood. Victoria leaned back, sipping her tea. "It's exhausting sometimes," she admitted. "Balancing work and motherhood. I spend my days making million-dollar decisions. But at night, I wonder if I failed Ethan because I miss another school event. I worry that I'm not enough for him." Marcus's voice was calm, steady. "Every parent feels that. I've asked myself the same questions. But look upstairs, listen to them. That laughter? That's proof we're doing something right. They don't need perfection. They just need us." For the first time, she let out a genuine laugh, light, unguarded. "You're wiser than I realize, Marcus. At work, I only saw your dedication to deadlines and projects. I thought that was all there was. And I thought you were just an exceptionally demanding boss," he admitted with a grin. "I never imagined the person behind the title. Someone who goes home, helps with homework, worries about whether they're doing enough." Her eyes softened as she regarded him. "Maybe we've both been wearing masks." Upstairs, the boys' voices rose in excitement, followed by the sound of feet pounding across the floor. Jamie's enthusiastic explanations about constellations and weather experiments drifted down, joined by Ethan's eager replies. "They're getting along well," Victoria observed, her lips curving into another small smile. "Better than well," Marcus said. "Jamie hasn't laughed like that since his best friend moved away last month. He's been lonely, though he'd never admit it. Meeting Ethan is good for him." Victoria nodded slowly, absorbing his words. Her hand brushed across the rim of her mug, as if grounding herself. "I didn't expect to feel this at ease tonight. For years I've kept everything compartmentalized. Work in one box, motherhood in another. But being here, it feels like those walls don't matter as much." Marcus met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "Sometimes the walls just keep us from seeing what's right in front of us." For a long moment, they sat in silence, listening to the rain. It wasn't awkward. Rather, it was a silence of 2 people realizing they shared something far deeper than a professional title. Eventually, the storm began to ease. The rain softened, the thunder rolled farther away, leaving only the occasional flicker of lightning on the horizon. Victoria glanced toward the window, then back at Marcus. "Marcus," she began carefully, her tone more tentative than he had ever heard it. "Would you and Jamie like to join Ethan and me for dinner this weekend? Nothing formal, just 2 families spending time together." He understood instantly. This wasn't just about dinner. It was about continuing the fragile, unexpected connection that had formed tonight, about giving their children more laughter, and perhaps giving themselves permission to step out from behind their masks. "We'd like that very much," Marcus replied, his smile warm. "But I should warn you, Jamie will probably want to show Ethan every science experiment he's ever attempted in our backyard." Victoria chuckled softly, the sound carrying relief. "And I should warn you, Ethan will probably want to invent a few new ones. My neighbors may never forgive me." Their laughter blended together, light and unforced, as though it had been waiting all along for the right moment. Sometimes, The most important conversations don't happen in polished boardrooms or carefully managed meetings. Sometimes, they happen in modest living rooms during unexpected storms, when two people discover that the masks they wear hide remarkably similar hearts. And as Victoria gathered her son and prepared to head home, Marcus knew this night had changed everything, not just for him, not just for her, but for both of their children, and perhaps for the possibility of something new neither of them had dared to imagine